Hey there, everyone. Right now we're going to start working on value, which is super exciting with our drawings. It really helps to bring them to life to, produce something kind of more dramatic in terms of lights and darks, and it really helps to, affect your compositions in a really exciting and innovative way. So we've talked, quite a bit about how to gauge proper proportion and scale in our work, as well as, some different compositional strategies and really thinking about how we frame our drawing, and even, dealing with some kind of textural elements as well as pattern. But now we're really going to dive in a little bit deeper and really create a sense of informed value. So first off, we're going to, take a look at some images of other artists' works and get a little bit more of a sense of really what we're going to be focusing on for the next series of drawings that we produce.
So let's start off with just a tiny bit of review here regarding composition. Just a few terms. Composition, as you may recall, is the organization or arrangement of the elements of art in a given work. And related to that is the picture plane. This is the two-dimensional surface on which shapes are organized into a composition, essentially your sheet of paper. So with composition, there are some important terms that are related to that, and one of those is the focal point, and this is the area towards which the viewer's eye is most compellingly drawn in a composition. A compositional device which is emphasizing a certain area or object to draw attention to the piece and to encourage closer scrutiny of the work. So throughout my discussions, I'll be showing you a mix of both contemporary and historical artists. Here we have Shazia Sikandar, who is a contemporary Pakistani-American visual artist who works across a variety of mediums, including, drawing, painting, printmaking, animation, installation, performance, and even video. So what do you think is the focal point of this work? There could even be several. You might take a look at this and find your eye going most towards this area where there's a lot of condensed smaller lines overlaid on one another, or you might find yourself, more drawn to even this open area. So you see the open, empty area really balances well with this more condensed area with more of the lines. You could also find your eye, moving around on these sort of orange bits of color as well. So, the artist directs the viewer's eye in quite interesting ways. So related to composition, there's what is called open form or active space. This is something that I've been encouraging you to take a look at. And this is the placement of elements in a composition so that they're cut off by the boundary of a design. So this really implies that the picture is a partial view of a larger scene. So when you're looking at this artist, she also crosses cultural borders to produce innovative contemporary work that combines media. The art here, it negotiates the cultural terrain between her adopted home in America and her native home in Nigeria, creating collage and photo transfer-based paintings that expose the challenges of occupying these two worlds. And the fact that she breaks the edges of these canvases really suggests that space beyond this small area of the world that she's depicting. In opposition to that more active space, we also have the other term, which is closed form or inactive space. And this is the placement of objects by which a composition keeps the viewer's attention within the picture. So you can see clearly in this work by Toba Kadori, the very purposeful use of closed form, which utilizes the large empty space around the house to create a kind of visualization of weight and repression within the work. So here we come to the basic term value, which is what we're going to be dealing with for the next number of drawings that we produce. This would be the gradation of light and dark that goes across a form. It is determined both by the lightness of the object and by its natural color, its local color, and by the degree of light that strikes it. So for me as a seasoned artist, I honestly don't use the word shading when I refer to creating light and dark in a drawing. Shading really refers to a kind of coloring in, and I don't like to think of drawing as that, but more as a close observation of what I'm seeing in terms of light and dark. And so when I refer to light and dark, you're going to hear me use the term value. So changes in value, whether sudden or gradual, can add greatly to the visual impact of art forms. So changes in value can also be used to help the artist express an idea. So here you have a work by Kate Kollwitz, a little bit more of a historical artist. She was a German artist who was working in the areas of painting, printmaking, and sculpture. And her most famous kind of artworks depict the effects of poverty, hunger, and war on the working class. She was working mostly and most proficiently during and after World War I. She saw much tragedy in her life, and value was an amazing expressive tool for her in showing the sorrow of these images. So as we go through and take a look at how we can depict value, let's take a look at also some of the terms related to the methods that we're going to be using. So one of those is cross-hatching, and this is a series of intersecting sets of parallel lines used to indicate shading or volume in a drawing. So value can be developed in a drawing in multiple ways, like I was mentioning. So this is one way that you might decide to depict value. So if you examine the value scale below, you can see, how the light end or on the left uses a simple pattern of parallel lines spaced widely apart to represent light, and the dark end on the right have layers of crisscrossing lines to create a feeling of shadow. So this method for creating value is most often used with pen and ink drawings as well as with the technique of printmaking. So take a closer look at this image, as it's something that we'll try out later in future drawing demonstrations. You can see here how the artist is using different techniques to create value. So you have charcoal, ink wash, and pen and ink. So with these, they'll have, the same kind of value range, but really depicted in very different ways, and you can see very clearly the effects that this can give off for you and how you might choose to utilize, each method in a drawing that you produce. Chiaroscuro is another term related to value, and this refers to the light and dark to create kind of more of a dramatic effect of form and space. And this was used, again, also by more historical artists and mainly in the Renaissance. So this was a word that was borrowed from the Italian meaning light and shade or dark, referring to the modeling of a volume by depicting light and shade by contrasting them boldly. So this one means of strengthening an illusion of depth on a two-dimensional surface and was an important topic among these Renaissance artists. So Rembrandt here used lighting effects to achieve an impression of depth. He came up with the use of a spotlight in painting, a beam of light that lightens the head and the shoulders of the main figure while leaving everything else in shadow. So this creates a dramatic theatrical effect. Such chiaroscuro was also used in history paintings where the center of the composition is lit with light and the periphery with the background is in shadow. The light effects helps the viewers to focus on the main area of the painting, and Rembrandt also used such light effects to differentiate planes. So here you have another work by Rembrandt. You can see that this one is more produced with ink wash and pen and ink line. And again, still quite dramatic in terms of its effects of light and dark. Another term is modeling, so the change from light to dark across a surface, and a technique for creating spatial illusion, particularly form. So the term modeling I find, a little bit odd. In this sense, I'm not referring to drawing figure models. Modeling here instead refers to depicting a form through the use of light and dark, basically value, but more related to specifically developing form. So another term that's super important that I try my best to get across to students is cross-contour line. And this is line that describes an object's horizontal or cross contours. This type of line emphasizes the volumetric aspects of an object. So John Curran is another contemporary artist. He has used the methods of the old masters and transformed them in his own way to create contemporary images that are kind of a twist on the past. Cross-contour lines, again, you have to keep in mind that they're different than the contour line drawing that we have done in the past. We typically use contour lines to define the edges of objects and details within them. Contour lines are visible lines or lines defined by contrast. In other words, we can actually see contour lines in most circumstances. whereas cross-contour lines are implied lines, which means they cannot necessarily see them. They might not be visible on the subject. Instead of defining the edges and details of the subject, cross-contour lines describe the form. Cross-contour lines flow over the form of the object. So a good way to understand this concept is to take your finger and move it slowly over the surface of an object, following a straight path. Watch your finger as you move it and try to imagine that it's leaving a line as it moves. Your finger will move and change direction according to the form. So the best way to understand the concept of cross-contour lines is to simply practice drawing them by observing a subject. Simple objects like an apple work best if you are new to this concept. So plane is another term to get used to in terms of value. This is a two-dimensional continuous surface with only one direction. So another aspect, of form involves these planes. So this is a term that is used really when depicting flat surfaces. And then related to that is a term called planar analysis. This is an approach in which shape functions as plane as a component of volume. So instead of drawing around a form, with planar analysis, you're essentially kind of putting the form in an imagined box, like you see with these figure drawings here. The term form itself, in its broadest sense, is the total structure of a work of art. That is the relation of the elements of art and the distinctive character of the work. So it has two definitions to it, a larger one and a more narrower one. So in this narrow sense, the shape, configuration, or substance of an object within that configuration. So basically just one of these objects is form, but also the entire picture and depiction of those objects is considered form, the entire work. So as we continue with value, we're going to take a close look at the 6 categories of light as it falls over a form. So these include highlight, light, shadow, core of shadow, reflective light, and cast shadow. So these 6 categories are really very important to really realistically develop and depict form in a drawing. So you can see here, this student has used that reflective light, which I find to be really the most important key when trying to show form in a drawing. Like you might, see what happens. Like if you just shaded or created value all the way out to the edge of this egg without doing the reflected light versus with, and you'll see the huge difference in how that form really pops out. So make sure that you're very closely observing, that form as you see it in space. It often reflects, the environment that it's placed on and what's on the table or reflection of light that's bouncing off of other elements around it. Volume is the quality of a form that has height, width, and depth, and this is the representation of this quality. So as in depicting light, artists may comply with nature to describe space as it actually appears, or they can promote the feeling of space by the use of value. Spatial depiction has many manifestations. There's no single way to indicate space. The handling of space is a result of the artist's view tempered by culture and personality. So now that we have a bit of a basis for using art terms and methods which describe value, our next series of drawings will be focusing on putting these methods into action and learning further by depicting value in a work ourselves. So be sure to just subscribe and join me on my next art demonstration, and I'll see you next time.